All right, welcome to the Social Dig. This is your boy, Mr. Rob G, coming at you with Friday Night Live. And, a lot of weird things going on in ufology right now. And it's a very interesting week. I just did a rant video talking about the Chinese spy balloon. Crazy, right? What do we have in the news today? There's another balloon that has been discovered and shot down. However, they didn't give us many details on this one. They didn't show us much. And we're gonna kind of go ahead and jump into that. Let me actually, I'm gonna bring in my guy Mateo right here. All right, hey,
Hey,
Mateo, how are you
what's
today?
going on, Rob? I'm doing all right, my friend. How about yourself? Good to see you.
Man, hey Mateo, it's crazy stuff going on in ufology, man. It's an interesting week to say the least.
Yeah, man. I was
Um,
out of town, as you well know, and everything went crazy while I was out of town. So you'll have to do your. You're going to catch me up along with everybody else. But in any
what
event,
Well, I mean, I did a rant earlier this week talking about putting the Chinese spy balloon to bed. Just kind of pointing out some of the things that I saw, and as far as how coincidental it was that on the heels of the UAP report, where they mentioned balloon-like entities, less than 4 weeks later, we have a crystal clear image of a balloon-like entity, and then they're able to shoot it down in front of the world, broadcast on every news network out there, and I just felt like it was misdirection. So I thought it was over. I did that video, did the rant, thought it was over. Wake up today, and here we go. We have another incident. They didn't show us, and I think I may have an idea why. So let's go ahead and jump into just some of the stuff that they were saying at the press conference today regarding the UAP, or I figure it's UAP regarding this
the
Chinese
object, as they're
spy
calling
balloon.
it.
Right. So here we go. Let's take a look.
On February 9, North American Aerospace Defense Command detected an object on ground radar and further investigated and identified the object using fighter aircraft. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. U.S. Northern Command is beginning recovery operations now. U.S. Northern Command's Alaska Command coordinated the operation with assistance from the Alaska Air National Guard, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have no further details about the object at this time, including any description of its capabilities, purpose, or origin. The object was about the size of a small car, so not similar in size or shape to the high-altitude surveillance balloon that was taken down off the coast of South Carolina on February 4. And while I won't go into specifics due to classification reasons, I can say that we have located a significant amount of debris so far that will prove helpful to our further understanding of this balloon and its surveillance capabilities. The Secretary expressed his thanks and appreciation to Minister Anand for the cooperation rendered by Canada in tracking the PRC high-altitude surveillance balloon that violated the sovereignty of both of our countries. During the meeting, both leaders reaffirmed the close defense relationship between the United States and Canada, and a readout will be available later today on defense.gov. And with that, I will take your questions. We'll start with Associated Press, Tara Kopp.
Okay. You mentioned there was a reasonable threat. Was there also a threat to potentially this object detecting some of our more sensitive radar capabilities that are based in Alaska? And then what hasn't been said is where this object has come from. Is there any indication that this was also a Chinese surveillance balloon object, whatever it is?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't know the origin of the object. Again, we will know more once we're able to potentially recover some of those materials. But the primary concern, again, was the potential hazard to civil flight. And so, again, we'll know more later. Thank you.
Thanks for taking my question.
Okay, so yeah, this is the tag that I used the other day, and I guess it's fitting for today. We'll just leave it up for the graphic. So,
Did you
what
notice
did
he
you think
said
about what he
balloon
just
halfway
said?
through?
Yes, he did. Now, so here's
He slipped up and said he
here's the
called it a
piece.
balloon.
So here's I kind of just put something together, and I basically stated that so we have another Chinese balloon shot down in grand fashion. So that's 2 for 2 on the Chinese shoot down of these drones. However, the UAP swarm on Navy ships, as skeptics continue to try to debunk as Chinese drones were not either shot down nor could be shot down. So I feel like just with them showing the Chinese drone, them shooting it down, showing how non-anomalous this thing actually is, this is the clearest evidence out there that proves to you that the UAP swarm and Chinese drones are not the same. Let me repeat, they are not the same. There is no way in the world that you can go forward. This is to the Midwest, to all the debunkers out there who want to hang their hat on these being spy drones launched from a Chinese ship. They showed you the Chinese drone. They showed you that it's a balloon. They showed you that they could get a crystal clear image of it on the first try. And they showed you that it was full of hot air. So what does that mean? That means that the only terrestrial explanation has now officially, yet indirectly, taken any plausible terrestrial option off the table. Okay? So today is the day all debunkers should begin to open up their minds to the fact that the UFO issue is actually real, guys. Now, we have seen Russia's tech, poor tech at that, and we have seen China's tech at this point.
Poor tech as well.
Poor tech, nothing prosaic, nothing anomalous here. So at this point, guys, debunkers, it's time to open up your mind. No more excuses. There aren't any more left. So are they being, and one thing that I did notice is the fact that I feel like they realize that grandstanding this whole situation with the first balloon actually revealed a lot more than they wanted it to reveal by the pieces we just put together right now. So by them doing this, they have clearly gone against anything that they've tried to write off as what these swarms are, these things that we're seeing. So I feel like it was a trick to misdirect, but then at the same time, they actually ended up putting themselves in a position where now they can't take it back. And so the second balloon, now they don't want to show us pictures. Now they really don't want to release too much information about the second balloon. And I feel like that might be so to add the mystery back in there because they realize that they screwed up by giving out all this information to begin with. Now, are they being quiet about the most recent shoot down because they realized the mistake made by publicizing the first shoot down? What do you think, Mateo?
Rob, you couldn't have said it better, but in spite of my absence, I did do a quick cram today, and I did learn a couple things. First off, I think the whole thing was a big publicity stunt on the government's part, right? By really dragging out the first balloon and mystifying the second object, which we have that other clip I'll show you later where John Kirby from the White House also tripped over and said balloon when he had to retract it. But the whole point of this was to make it crystal clear to the world that A, we found out what this is Chinese, the first one. B, this is their pathetic capability. If they're flying balloons over our land in order to take spy photos, please, how effective can it be? And three, they want the whole world to know that China's the bad guy here, right? Oh, look what China's doing and how terrible is this, and we need to all stand together against them. That's the primary PR program that's going on here. But as you pointed out, this clearly points that the capability of the UAPs that were swarming the Navy ships far exceeds any of this. No one can. I can't wait for the press reporter to say, "Well, you're shooting down these balloons now. Why didn't you shoot down some of those things that were swarming the Navy ships?" That's what you're probably wondering. So they showed their hand by publicizing this. And one other point I'll make, which I found out today, I'm not sure if you knew this, but actually was revealed a couple days ago. Apparently 3 balloons similar to the one that got shot down off the southeast coast of the United States after it overflew the whole place. That happened 3 times during Trump's administration. And they probably deliberately didn't tell anybody about it because they wanted to observe the balloon. Apparently this balloon that they shot down last Saturday, they may not have told anyone about it either, but I guess some press people in Montana spotted it or heard about it and kind of blew the lid off of it. So the government had to respond now because, the public's aware and here's the Chinese are overflying the country. We have to make it look like we're doing something about it. So who knows what's going on? But the bottom line is the Chinese do not have the capability to produce the drones that are exhibiting the 5 observables, right? That's my opinion. And this just really drives the point home. And as you said, they may not have intended to reveal that, but they sure did.
They sure did. And what I'm going to do right now, and I appreciate your input on that, let me go ahead and we have the second part of that clip, and then we actually have another guest coming in to talk about this with us. So let's go ahead and run this clip.
What additional information you have now about the capabilities of that balloon?
Yeah, so we're continuing to assess that. Again, I'm not able to go into more detail other than, in addition to learning a lot about the balloon and the capabilities that it has while it was over the continental United States, we have identified or located a significant amount of debris on the ocean floor that will be very beneficial to us learning more about it. But at this point in time, I'm not going to have more details.
So a couple questions. First of all, has anything like this happened before with an object this size, this shape, in this particular height for the 40,000 foot range? Has it happened before? And then second of all, can you say more about why you knew that last balloon or object was from China, whereas this one you don't know?
So in terms of this particular object, again, as I highlighted, we don't know where it's from. It posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and so the determination was made to take it down. In terms of the other balloon, as I mentioned in our previous briefing, we have learned a lot about the Chinese surveillance high-altitude balloon program. We've gathered a lot of information over the last couple of years, and so we were able to, based on that information, detect at a very early stage. As it approached U.S. airspace, we had a good understanding of what it was. As I mentioned, we were able to monitor that closely, track it while it went over the continental United States, learn a lot about it, and take it down at the appropriate time.
So would you urge us to put this in a different bucket than that, or should we?
Yeah, I think I was pretty clear. This was traveling at about 40,000 feet, which posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and the decision was made to take it down. So, Dan.
When the pilots approached it, and they determined, I understand, that it was not manned. How did they determine that? And at that point, wouldn't it be possible to at least describe what they were looking at? Did it resemble a balloon or an airplane or what?
Again, we'll know more and have more information once we've recovered this. I will give credit to our pilots that they're very capable in terms of looking at an object, assessing whether or not this had the potential to be manned. At that altitude, something that small, very, very unlikely that it was manned. And so, again, no indication that it was manned, presented a potential reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and we took it down.
All right. And it looks like we have the man with the plan, Mr. Tim Senor, coming through here. So, Tim. I know you saw the news here. Did you hear our take on? Did you hear my take, man? I mean, as far as I believe that these things, well, actually, I just really am pointing out that these are Chinese drones. See how easily they get shot down. See how easily you can take photographs of them. These are not what were swarming the U.S. Navy ships. What did you think about this news that broke today, and what was your view on it, and how did you feel about it?
First of all, it is great to see you guys.
It is.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be on here with you on the Social Dig, and it's such an important show, and you guys are doing a great job. So thank you so
Thank you,
much
Tim.
for that invitation. I
Always
really
a joy to have you, man.
Always. That's his family now at this point.
Yeah,
so
man.
it was, yeah.
I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. So yeah, I've been following this story very closely, and I have friends that are, considered on the inside, if you will. And so, we've been back and forth on this topic. And for me personally, there's not a lot of interest in this, to be completely honest. This is our known tech, whether it's ours or theirs, irrelevant. It doesn't really come into the purview of UFO for me personally. However, there's a very interesting social dynamic that we're seeing. And there's also some red flags that I've seen go up, how it's politically being handled. So there is some overlap. And I'll draw, my opinion on that with you guys. Absolutely no problem. So, for example, what draws a red flag for me on this is how it was initially brought to the public's attention as a UFO story, and reported on by the person that even got the original video as being a UFO. And so I think that that's fine. That's probably to be expected because it was odd looking up in the sky. However, what I find is that we quickly deciphered what it was, and the same program still was reporting on it and considering it UAP. And then we found that our government treated it like a UAP, even though they knew what it was at this point. And so I find that it's a little distressing that they're able to buy time with the topic of UFO, to buy time in their decision making for UAP. And I want to decipher those two because I feel it's so important to really relegate the fact that there are two different, definitive distinctions at this point. UAP is what the government is interested in, could be our tech, could be our adversaries' tech. And then there's UFO, and that's what I am personally more interested in. And it is the other, the 5% of the other that we don't know what it is, right? So the overlap that this balloon story took into the UAP UFO topic is what drew me in and made me interested in how they handled it. Because what we saw this morning is that they refused to call this a balloon. They were still calling it an object. And that loans to this terminology that they're trying to put things in buckets. And I find that is concerning. Perhaps you guys would like to bounce back some ideas on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mateo.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. Obviously, the government isn't going to be forthright in what is really going on, and thankfully, they didn't use the term UAP to describe this. They've tripped up multiple times. We saw Brigadier General Ryder call it a balloon, even though he, in his written statement, it was an object. Although at one point in his written statement, he also used the term balloon, and then John Kirby, the National Security Council coordinator there at the White House, he tripped up and called it a balloon more than once, the second object, that is. So what game are they playing here is what you're wondering. Why are they manipulating public perception deliberately so that we are confused about what's in our skies? And are they using that to their advantage to mask the reality of the UAP phenomenon that we all know exists? and whatever else they want to hide.
And the other part about that is I've been looking at some stories over the last few days about the balloon before this happened. And they had stated that these things have actually been noticed in the sky since like 2012. So we're talking about 11 years that they've been seeing these things. Now I think, and I think what the government is good at giving you a lot of information and clouding your judgment so that the clear thought path that you had before is no longer there. So I think the big takeaway is not, is it a Chinese drone? Was it really launched by China, and all the implications behind that, the political implications? I think what it clearly did, and I think they didn't mean to do this. I think when they broke the story and they showed what these things look like, they showed us that they were able to, on the first time, take a crystal clear image of the object, of whether anomalous or not. Crystal clear. Okay. And then if you remember with the UAP report, even the congressional hearing we had, the public hearing, where they continuously tried to describe what we were seeing and what we had recorded on radar and all these mediums as drone technology in either China or Russia. They put it on them. They said China, Russia, or other, right? Or otherworldly. So I think what the biggest thing that we should take away from this situation is the fact that they just ruled out China as being the source of these anomalous crafts that are swarming ships. Russia took themselves out of that picture when they invaded Ukraine and showed us how crappy their technology is over there. So I think the two plausible answers or explanations that they had for these swarms on our Navy ships has been taken off the table. And then on top of that, it played the first clip. He gladly says, oh yeah, we saw that, we figured it was a threat, we shot it down. So 100 UAP swarming a Navy ship is not a threat or a problem. If it was, shouldn't they have been able to shoot one of those things down, which they couldn't or they didn't? So the line has been drawn. So drones are over here. All the excuses, debunkers, and the fuel that they ever had from the first video that was dropped by Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp off the table. So I think the moment that we have here, and not to mention, he mentions in the clip that they shot it down because it was at 40,000 feet and it was at a level that was at a risk to commercial travel. Well, these UAP that we've been seeing are at those same levels as well, and also, also present a safety issue for commercial flight. So I think what they did is they really just told everything, or they put themselves in a pickle, and I don't know that they can get themselves out of this one. I would hope at this point that someone like Mick West or some of the big debunkers out there can look at this and see, well, wow, they weren't drones, and then maybe open up their mind to the fact that, wait, okay, something else might be going on here. So but you have to think that way in order to decipher what really to take out of this, because I think a lot of people out there are just so in their personal lives are so wrapped up in politics and political views that they will be more focused on the political side of what this means, and that doesn't even matter. If we're talking about getting to disclosure and the little pieces that we need to put in the puzzle to put it all together, this was one more of those, and I think it was a big one. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff there. A lot of really great stuff that got me thinking. And in fact, if you want to consider, so I know the entire timeline, right? And you even brought up a great point that these balloons are nothing new. They've been going over Canada and South America and the United States for decades. It's nothing new. And so the fact that now we're drawing attention to this particular balloon and taking it down publicly is something to be addressed, right? And we can't not look at it as the UFO community, because they're using our community kind of as a blanket as to why they took so long to deal with it. Now, let's also consider the fact that this was interesting. If you look at the timeline of this particular balloon that came in, our government was aware of it. People that needed to know knew about it, and life was going on as per usual. And then suddenly there was a photograph from the public that was calling it a UFO. And shortly after, there was better video of it that proved that it wasn't, and it was in fact a balloon. And now we needed to address it. And now the government steps in and the secretary cancels his trip to China. And let me just consider that point for a moment, that it seems that that was a knee-jerk reaction to the public outrage, or perhaps the public opinion of how the president handled it, and that our military handled that takedown. And so was this potentially only dealt with this way because of the public response and the UFO community being aware of it? Because we have, quite a lot of support in the UFO community. So I'm just wondering, do you think that this is potentially a tool to try and hold up those peaceful talks that potentially could have taken place with the secretary going over to China and putting those talks off? Diplomatically, that has made a change, and it is because of a result of this balloon. So are they connected? And why now are we making a big deal out of a balloon if we've known about them for decades?
Right. And it's you got something on that, Mattel?
Oh, yeah. No, Tim, you may have heard me mention before you came in about how there was discussion earlier in the week that there were 3 overflights of similar balloons during the Trump administration. And all I can say is this, and then the exposure of last week's blimp by the people who photographed it. I think they were in Montana. And by the way, this question came up today in either the press conference with the general or the press conference with John Kirby at the White House. I don't remember which one, but a guy did ask. He said, well, would you have told us if those people hadn't taken photos, given that previous overflights were hushed up? My belief is that they would not have. And the reason I feel that way is because, come on, it's a balloon. This isn't a threat. What it is they're using it as an opportunity to learn what the capabilities of the adversary's spy equipment is. And they can and they did that deliberate. Now, once it's exposed, they immediately exploited it in all the ways you cited, both of you have cited. The Secretary of State is going to use it as a bargaining chip now with the Chinese, right? So now you go into the meeting saying, hey, we were going to come earlier, but, you're flying this spy gear over our country and the citizens are concerned. He's going to use that to his advantage.
Do you think this is the first time we've taken one down secretly?
Oh, no, I'm sure we've taken plenty down and we've let them fly over, because here's the other thing. You don't want your enemy to know what you know, right? So if you don't take the balloon down and the adversary thinks they got away with it, but you didn't really let them get anything of any value, right? Which I'm sure we didn't, by either shutting down. I heard them talk today in the press conferences about how they shut down any of the sensitive military sites that they knew the first balloon was going to fly over. The second one was blown out of the sky because they knew they upset people with how long they took on the first one. But you know what? If the first one hadn't been found out, bet you they wouldn't have touched it. They would have just silenced everything and observed it all the way through and let it go on its merry way like the other ones had.
Right.
And it's all a part of a bigger game that they're playing, and it's a chess match with the Chinese and with the American people. That's my view of it.
Do you think that if we had knowledge of something like this going and the public was unaware and our military was aware, that they would use that as an advantage to potentially disinform whoever is manipulating those balloons over the territory perhaps lead the balloon over something to falsify information or feed it false information? Do you think that they do that? And the fact that it went public, now they had to take it down. But
Absolutely.
do you
Come
think we
on.
do things like that?
I'm sure we do to a degree that would shock all of us, right?
Right.
We're all
Right.
brutally honest people here. We seek the truth. We don't like being lied to. But this is a serious game that they're playing here. This
That's
is world
why
domination, right?
maybe they let it happen because they're like, well, we'll let it go to here because it feeds them this. Like, you
It
know what I
feeds
mean?
them this, and it also makes them think they got away with it. So therefore, this technology need not be changed. It's like, oh, we can fly balloons over the U.S. all the time. They don't even know it.
And they
Now
might
it's a
up their
big
game. Who knows what comes next? Like, this is a massive
right.
balloon. It could have more tech than the previous ones. So it was
Correct.
valuable. I see
So
what you're
I
saying.
mean, we come on. We know the capability of our military is 50 years, at least 50 years beyond what we all know, which is probably an understatement. So
Yeah.
these balloons aren't a threat. It was exposed. Now they're using it as a political pawn in the chess match to get their way, perhaps with China, and also expose the fact to the world that look what the Chinese are doing right now. That China can be the bad guy, and not to say that we don't do worse, but I'm not saying that what we're doing is right or wrong. I'm saying is that we have to protect ourselves. But the point is they're using it now to their advantage, and it does end up coming back to the whole UAP phenomena, right? Because once again, it clouds the whole judgment of everybody as to what's what, classifications, names, descriptions, etc.
I'll say this. I'll say that politically, just vying for control is definitely something that's on the mind of any superpower out there. So obviously that can be a thing there, but I think disclosure is even more of a bigger threat than anything that any of these other countries can do. And so it kind of almost seems like with the first balloon that it was actually grandstanded. It took a road trip tour across the continental United States, state by state, collecting postcards and all the way till it left. And then they shoot it down in this grand display to be seen by the entire world. Now, that's almost like a Disney movie. I mean, that's too perfectly coordinate or put together for it to be a coincidence
Right.
or
They
a
did it
mistake.
for a reason.
They did this for a reason, and I think the bigger threat to them, and not just to them, but to China, who could have truthfully even been in on this whole thing behind the scenes, because it doesn't just affect the United States government with disclosure; it affects every government. So every
Right.
government out there that wants control over their people would behoove themselves to be behind a plan to cloud disclosure. So I think it's bigger than that. I think it's but I think what happens is, and they know that most people will get caught up in the politics, and that's exactly why it's being positioned as this political thing. Oh, we should be taking this seriously. It's China. They're spying. They're right over. They flew a balloon right over our heads. Okay, being that they've been doing it for 13 years, then what are you guys doing? What have you been doing this whole time? You know
Right.
what I mean? This is something you could have brought up 5 years ago, or even when when you released the first report and you said that there was the potential that some of these things were explained and this and that. If it was just as clear as looking up and seeing a spy balloon float across the sky, I figured this is something that you could have released. But the strings that tie it together for me are the UAP report saying balloon-like entities for the first time. Then less than 4 weeks later, there is this big production of exactly what they mentioned, broadcast across the world,
Great point.
not just this state.
Let's hope, Rob. Let's hope, and Tim. Let's hope that they're one of those people in the press corps who were at both of those press conferences today. Let's hope at least one of them connects these dots and asks the $1 million question that we alluded to earlier. Well, if you identified these and shot them down, why were you unable to do anything about the UAPs that swarm the Navy ship, or the Tic
It's
Tac,
Yeah,
or
such a
the
good point.
cube in the sphere?
it
Why
should be
were
the
you
first
unable to
question.
do anything about that? That was at commercial airline traffic altitudes, or
Right.
commercial traffic altitudes. Those were threats. Heck, they were threats to the military, as
Yeah.
Brian Graves has stuck to his whole time since he came out, and has been
Right.
driving the point home about what the reality was that he lived, and what he's doing now to help keep it moving and support the other pilots. So yes, let's hope somebody asks this question, because then that answer I really want to hear.
Right, but it's tricky because it's under that UAP protection blanket where they're not going to fire on something they're not sure of. Like if it's a questionable target, they're not just going to fire on it because it could be a UAP now, like, right? So that's incredibly frustrating because we're not seeing any action, and we're definitely not going to get answers by just sitting back and watching these things infiltrate our airspace.
No.
And if you look at it, it was just so funny to me. And I'm going to play the clips again. They're 2 short clips for the audience, especially since we've kind of elaborated on our thoughts. And now listen to how those clips sound when they sit up there and describe it. To me, it got to me because if I didn't know they were talking about spy balloon, and if you took out the Chinese spy part of this and you just put in UAP, and just every time they say spy balloon, take that out and put in UAP, this is the way they should be coming and having press conferences about these anomalous things in the sky. So it's thorough, and as much he says, when we see these things, we track them, all these different types of systems track them. And so that means you're tracking UAP too. So it's and Ross Coulthard kind of said it, he pointed out the fact that they come into this subject, or to this story, and they said it on the grand stage. Why aren't we putting the UAP conversation on that same grand stage and giving it this much attention? The press corps was full of people. They're in there. They're excited. The energy's up. The representative speaking on behalf of the government is more than willing to talk about the information. And it's like, okay, that's what we need for the UAP subject. But I just want to play this back for anybody who might have just been joining us or listen to what we've been talking about, and then we can go ahead and go from there. So let me play this one more time here. This is part 1 of my clip.
On February 9, North American Aerospace Defense Command detected an object on ground radar and further investigated and identified the object using fighter aircraft. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. U.S. Northern Command is beginning recovery operations now. U.S. Northern Command's Alaska Command coordinated the operation with assistance from the Alaska Air National Guard, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have no further details about the object at this time, including any description of its capabilities, purpose, or origin. The object was about the size of a small car, so not similar in size or shape to the high-altitude surveillance balloon that was taken down off the coast of South Carolina on February 4. And while I won't go into specifics due to classification reasons, I can say that we have located a significant amount of debris so far that will prove helpful to our further understanding of this balloon and its surveillance capabilities. The Secretary expressed his thanks and appreciation to Minister Anand for the cooperation rendered by Canada in tracking the PRC high-altitude surveillance balloon that violated the sovereignty of both of our countries. During the meeting, both leaders reaffirmed the close defense relationship between the United States and Canada, and a readout will be available later today on defense.gov. And with that, I will take your questions. We'll start with Associated Press, Tara Kopp.
Okay. You mentioned there was a reasonable threat. Was there also a threat to potentially this object detecting some of our more sensitive radar capabilities that are based in Alaska? And then what hasn't been said is where this object has come from. Is there any indication that this was also a Chinese surveillance balloon object, whatever it is?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't know the origin of the object. Again, we will know more once we're able to potentially recover some of those materials. But the primary concern, again, was the potential hazard to civil flight. And so, again, we'll know more later. Thank you.
Thanks for taking my question.
Okay, clip one, and then we jump right into clip two.
What additional information you have now about the capabilities of that balloon?
Yeah, so we're continuing to assess that. Again, I'm not able to go into more detail other than, in addition to learning a lot about the balloon and the capabilities that it has while it was over the continental United States, we have identified or located a significant amount of debris on the ocean floor that will be very beneficial to us learning more about it. But at this point in time, I'm not going to have more details.
So a couple questions. First of all, has anything like this happened before with a object this size, this shape, in this particular height for the 40,000 foot range? Has it happened before? And then second of all, why did you, can you say more about why you knew that last balloon or object was from China, whereas this one you don't know?
So in terms of this particular object, again, as I highlighted, we don't know where it's from. It posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and so the determination was made to take it down. In terms of the other balloon, as I mentioned in our previous briefing, we have learned a lot about the Chinese surveillance high-altitude balloon program. We've gathered a lot of information over the last couple of years, and so we were able to, based on that information, detect at a very early stage. As it approached U.S. airspace, we had a good understanding of what it was. As I mentioned, we were able to monitor that closely, track it while it went over the continental United States, learn a lot about it, and take it down at the appropriate time.
So would you urge us to put this in a different bucket than that, or should we?
Yeah, I think I was pretty clear. This was traveling at about 40,000 feet, which posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and the decision was made to take it down. So, Dan.
When the pilots approached it, and they determined, I understand, that it was not manned. How did they determine that? And at that point, wouldn't it be possible to at least describe what they were looking at? Did it resemble a balloon or an airplane or what?
Again, we'll know more and have more information once we've recovered this. I will give credit to our pilots that they're very capable in terms of looking at an object, assessing whether or not this had the potential to be manned. At that altitude, something that small, very, very unlikely that it was manned. And so, again, no indication that it was manned, presented a potential reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and we took it down.
Reasonable threat to air traffic. And when you have stories of commercial craft talking about UAP off the edge of the wing or in their vicinity, they had to make a move to get out of the way. It's just, I laugh on the inside when I hear him say this about, like this balloon was ever going to be that type of threat. So I don't know. This thing has me all wound up. I did a rant about it the other day, and then I thought I was done with it until today, and then I'm like, oh my God. So I just
they may be trying to reel us all back in, Rob. That may be part of it. And I want to get Tim's opinion on that. Because you alluded to this earlier, Tim, and I really valued your point about the fact the military won't shoot down an unknown.
Man, I got a great quote.
What is your feeling? Do you feel like this is part of are they attempting to walk back? What are they going to use this to maybe walk back what we all are after here, to bring it all back to the whole UAP phenomena? Could this potentially be used to walk some of that back at a later date? And I mean, I hate to think that, but I can't help but think that.
Yeah. It's definitely a distraction, and it seems to be guiding it off topic.
Yep.
There's a great article from The Drive that, just as you were saying that, I was reading it. So I'd love to just read this quote.
Sure.
Yeah,
Please.
definitely.
Cool. And so this is right from The Drive. The gross inaction and the stigma surrounding the unexplained aerial phenomena as a whole has led to what appears to be the paralyzation of the systems designed to protect us and our most critical military technologies, pointing to a massive failure in U.S. military intelligence. So this is a blind spot we ourselves literally created out of cultural taboos and a military industrial complex that is ill-suited to foresee and counter a low-end threat that is very hard to defend against. I'm sorry, that isn't very hard to defend against. And again, using the UFO blanket as a way to buy time, to make decisions surrounding the unexplained aerial phenomena as a whole. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. And the fact is that they're talking about, they're looking for the well-documented cases of seemingly unexplainable events. However, they're not covering them in a way that makes any logical sense. They're not taking that aspect of it seriously. We haven't gotten any definitive data on what they consider a true UFO/UAP is, the real unexplained part, right? So all they're doing is giving us kind of the roundabout way of how they're going to handle the topic, which 99% of we know is clutter and our own mundane stuff. And so they're using a blanket policy to cover what mostly isn't UFO.
Mm-hmm. But they will apply it to everything since
Exactly.
it is a blanket.
It's flawed.
The only thing in that article, Tim, that I can't agree with entirely is the ineptitude of our own military. I refuse to accept the fact that our military is acting as, you know, the way they're acting is the reality. They
The
weren't
intelligence
surprised.
even?
They weren't surprised by this. They aren't incapable of dealing with it. They aren't. It's not that it's not that they don't have the intelligence. They knew this was coming. They knew it was coming. They could see it. NORAD saw it. Obviously, the second one was discovered yesterday, they said. What takes a day to get over Alaska? It's got a balloon. My point is they know that, and they're not going to they're going to make it seem like they don't. But in the background, they know, which means, back on the UAP topic, the fact that they don't know there is really telling. That means they're really going to have to hide it. So here they're kind of making it seem like, man, we're having trouble dealing with these balloons, which is kind of what the article said, and that's the portrayal. So, man, you don't expect us to have any answers anytime soon about those swarming drone objects, because we're having enough trouble with it.
So here, and I'm glad you said that. So because the view is that I have is that we shouldn't be waiting for them anyways. No. So it doesn't matter what their opinion is, or if they decide it's for us to decipher, and we have to take these tidbits that we get and put them in our book. And so when we look at this, so we're writing a book right now for the rest of humanity and for those who come after us. And we have enough examples that we can point to say that this is real, this isn't real. So we don't even need them to even talk about the swarms anymore. They've already been caught. They've been caught. They made it seem like they knew something we didn't know when they kept referring to the possibility of what was in that swarm to be either China, Russia, or other. So the other is what we're left with. And I don't think they can't walk that back. How can you walk that back when you just showed us an example of a Chinese drone and how easy it was to destroy and bring out the air? Then we know the common sense at that point tells you that this isn't that. So we don't need the government to tell us that. They basically told on themselves and we have to now remember that they did that, and don't even go back to get wrapped up in, oh, well, they still didn't say this. It doesn't matter what they say. It's what they didn't say or what they didn't do. And in this situation where I felt like in the beginning, I felt like the play was that they were trying to say, okay, we see, okay, UAP, balloon-like entities. They tied that in there. We never said balloon-like entities. So where did that description come from? So they throw it in there, and then now they've tied the UFO subject to the report, to the balloon-like entities that was listed in the report that nobody really agrees to, truthfully. And then now they tie it to this thing that's clearly a balloon. So they've taken what's really anomalous, take something like a balloon that's explainable or describable, and then tied it to an actual balloon that they shot down in front of the world. So if those plays are pretty evident, I mean, they're doing it right in front of your face. But I think the thing is that to not allow yourself to be like, okay, well, they said this about the Chinese balloon, but then they didn't say this. It's not about that. For a fact, they will never tell you what's going on. Disclosure will never come from the government. So there will never be a time that they sit up and agree that, okay, you got us. The swarms are really UAP and these are just balloons. We tried to trick you. That will never come out. So the wasting the time and kicking the can down the road, delaying reports and all that stuff, if you get wrapped up in that, then you're going to be one of the ones that is stuck in that, stuck in the misdirection. I think as humanity, we have to think it's like a daddy syndrome, mommy daddy syndrome. So if you're a kid, your parents could tell you about the birds and the bees, they're the gatekeepers to that information. However, you can clearly walk out into this world and find out another way without having to depend on those gatekeepers to give you the information. And I think that's just an analogy for the kind of syndrome we have with our government. We feel like we have to get the answer from them. It has to be them to give us the information, when really it's out there. And it's just about going out there as humans on our level, yes, and sifting through that stuff.
We can't let ourselves fall victim to this distraction.
It'd be a clear play. So if you're the powers that be and you realize, and I'll just go back a little bit, you remember ufology had run into a point where everybody was fighting amongst each other. The Lou Elizondos, who came in and gave us this great information, it was being reported that people behind the scenes may have been sowing dissension into ufology. I don't believe the war had really ties into it, but it's all coincidental that all this happens as disclosure gets some momentum. And we were at a point where it felt like disclosure was imminent, probably this time last year or a little later into the year, where the momentum was just there. And everybody was coming out with, hey, I heard this, I saw this will be coming out. Oh, it's right around the corner. And then all of a sudden we start getting hit with all these things to kind of trying to reel that back in. And I think it's a battle at this point between them and us, to like a tug of war for us to want disclosure, but them to not want us to get disclosure. So even if we don't look at them or depend on them and we try to go these other ways, they still throw little roadblocks out there or little detours or diversions to try to stop us from getting to that truth, because it's not in their best interest at the end of the day for us to know. It's just not. So I think that's the tough spot that we're in. Like, if you're going to battle for humanity, or you're going to stand for humanity, or let that be your cause, you have to understand government is not pro-humanity. So the two is oil and water. The two will never mix. And so we have to understand that, quit having this mommy daddy complex with our governments, feeling like information can only be valid if it comes through them. And because if we keep doing that, we'll never get there. We'll never get there.
What's the path ahead, Tim, through this? What do you feel that we should do to get over this speed bump and leave it behind? I mean, because it's really, it is a huge distraction, and everything Rob said is true. We can't count on them, the government. We have to drive ahead with what our plans were, which I know you have, to find the answer on our own. But how do we get through this in the short term?
Absolutely is to kind of like what I have done is just when I see stories like this, I box them and I talk about the social impact perhaps and how it affects the community. But really, like what you're saying, it's up to each one of us to have our own truth. Remember what brought you into this topic. Whatever that was that brought you to this topic, that's what you need to get back to. When you feel like you're getting overwhelmed or distracted and you're like, where do I get the truth? Remember what brought you here originally, whatever that passion is, whatever that connection is, whatever that experience was. Go back to that and get back to it and get yourself grounded again, because it is tough. And we're definitely in this for the long haul, and there's going to be a ton of distractions. In
Yep.
fact, I mean, the more I learn, the more I realize that there's very few people that perhaps even are close to the truth. And those people are so high, up in the government that by no means are we as the public ever going to receive that. I mean, they've covered it for 75 years so well. There's no way that we're going to pry the truth out of them suddenly now. It may feel like we've been close lately, but at the same rate, I don't feel like disclosure is a really tricky word there, because that is like not something that the government does. So in fact, what I kind of like to do is just get maybe some kind of confirmation, and if we can get confirmation that there is an other there, which we have gotten, I feel like that is the quote unquote disclosure. Right? The fact that they're admitting to the fact that there's something else that isn't ours, and we're not sure what that is, but let's not even talk about that. That tells me that there is something there.
Yes.
And that we get maybe one little drip of that out of the 1,000 drips of disinformation and confusing information and balloon topics that are still being called UFOs, and them calling it a balloon-like entity weeks before. Great point that you brought up there, Rob. Weeks before we have an experience with a balloon-like entity. I mean, come on. It's just one of those things that you have to see that the tail is absolutely wagging the dog, and we need to be aware of that. And that anything that you're seeing come across a news desk is absolutely form-fitted to you. And your social media is form-fitted to you. So you're going to get misinformation, distraction, and frustrated. So get back to your roots, get back to why you originally came to the topic, and just wait for those little drips of important information.
Yeah, and I really,
Rob's frustrated.
I get it.
And it's
it.
not,
We
it's
all
not
are.
really, it's not really frustration. I'm gonna tell you what it is. It's more so. And the reason why I do these shows is because I want to, as far as to progress humanity, but then I want to make sure that that certain things don't get overlooked. Like, we could brush this story off as and let it be told how it's being told, and just go with the flow, or we could try to figure out why we're being misdirected. Our lives are only, we're lucky to live 80 years on this earth, and time runs out for everybody. So the great Stanton Friedman, all the work that he did leading up in his life, and he never got to see the end. He never got to get to that point, and there was a lot of roadblocks in the way. So it's like there's going to be a lot more of that if people don't realize that we have to take this information and come together to kind of actually make some progress. Because if it's up to getting the answers through the news or through the government, then guess what? It'll never happen. It won't happen in your lifetime, my lifetime, anyone's lifetime. And we're doing this for the kids. We're doing this for our grandchildren, not for us specifically. It's for the people who will inherit this planet later on down the road. Now, when they come of age and they look back, what work did their grandfather do to try to help promote disclosure, or what view did their grandfather take on, it's like, oh, he was it's 100 years down the line. Look back and say, oh, my grandfather was a government apologist. You gotta just didn't believe, because I look back at some it was one in particular. Whose film was I watching? I was watching someone, and it was about John Mack, and how his colleagues were just sitting there like, oh, he's doing the wrong thing. It doesn't make sense. Oh, it's crazy what he's crazy. Those guys are on record drinking the Kool-Aid. So their descendants down the line have that video to look back at and say, man, he really wasn't trying to help the movement. Like, he really didn't get it. And I just want to make sure that people understand that what we're doing in this everyday conversation we're having is for your children and grandchildren and down the road family. It's not more so that UFOs are real, or it's not even that. It's just humanity is being faced with something that can change the direction of the path of everyone globally. And it's like, that's a big thing that you should want to be a part of when it comes down to making those decisions. So, that's why I do this. It's just more frustrating that people out there would believe the narrative, if more than anything. You know what I mean? So, but with that being said, this was This Week in Disclosure News. It was only supposed to go like 30 minutes. We did an hour, but I think we got everything out. So I kind of want to move on to the next thing, which was the meat of the show, which is really just talking about, and this could get spicy too, but it's the ET crash retrievals. Just kind of looking at them and thinking if any of these could have ever been thought about as potential shoot downs or conflicts. What do you think about that just before we start? Like, what's your view on these crash retrievals, and what do you think the motive is behind? Do you think they're just literally crashing and we're going to get the tech, and what do you think about that?
I'll start, Tim, if you want. The one part of the crash retrieval history, we all have, I have knowledge of a few of them, clearly not all, is I always was amazed at the fact that it seemed as if the radars of the 1940s and 50s was enough to take down a UAP, but today that's no longer the case. And I wonder about that. I wonder about the validity of that. I think it could very well have been true. So was that happening, or were there just malfunctions in the UAP that brought it about? That's the question you were asking. But it sure seemed like there was ample evidence and government documentation that was released via FOIA that indicates that some advanced radars back in the post-World War II era were taking these things down, deliberately or not. And now, what's happened? I mean, we've advanced in technology. Maybe the UAP have advanced as well, or they know how to steer clear of our radars. Who knows? But that's the one thing I often wonder about. So it begs the question, were these crashes deliberate, or were they truly accidents? And hard to say, because we haven't heard about too many in recent history, right? Most of the crash retrievals are fairly old, at least 20 or 30 years or more old, right? So that's the other thing that boggles my mind. If they were crashing then, why aren't they crashing now? Or is it just being covered up some more? What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, it's tough. And it feels like, I'm relatively new to this. I only started researching the topic since 2019. And I've been lucky to have met some incredible people that are already in the know. Some, they're still working in the government, and some that are ex, and then some that are just researchers and historians. But, I do ask this question pretty often. And depending on who I'm asking, I get a different answer. And so people from MUFON or that do research, historians typically have a deep belief in these crashes, that they really existed and that potentially they were because the ships weren't prepared for Earth's atmosphere or our tech, and lost control and crashed. There are even some theories out there that they're purposely crashed to give us the technology. I have a hard time with the whole concept only because of the individual pieces of information that I have got from people that work in the government that would know if there were these kind of crashes. And they are all just saying that, a lot of those stories were there to cover up other things or to sell a newspaper, or in one way just not true, right? And so that's really hard to hear.
Mm.
That's really hard to hear. And when I ask about metamaterials, or what is considered crash debris that has gotten into public sector or private sector or the government sector or military sector, I keep coming up with the same answer, that they just don't exist, that it's just not real. And so depending on who I ask, I get a different answer. So I honestly have no idea to the truth of it. I understand some of the history, and I want to believe those witnesses. So when it comes with a witness, I tend to believe it more, simply because there was somebody there that I would like to believe isn't out to gain anything. It's just so tough because we would have more evidence, I think, of it. And let's say it was in the private sector. If there were these great technologies, they would have been used in one way or another for profit. I mean, we would have seen these things out, and they would have been up for sale at one point. So I have a hard time with the concept of retrieval of metamaterials from crashes, or any crashes for that fact. However, there's another big part of me that I've had a personal experience that I can't explain. And so do I feel like we're being visited? Yeah, I do. But the fact that we're being visited doesn't mean that they've crashed here, right? And I feel like if they've managed to get here, you're talking about some massive technology and some massive distance. I don't think that our radar is going to take it down. I don't think that something that Earth has is any different than perhaps another planet that they've come in contact with has. And so I don't think that they would unexpectedly just crash here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe we took one down, but that also would be extraordinary because we've seen the capabilities, right? And we've also seen how our military reacts. They won't even shoot down a balloon until they know what it is. Now, historically, I know there was like the Battle of LA, right? And that, I mean, I've heard firsthand or secondhand witness accounts, actually secondhand. And that seems like that was a real event. Now, again, you don't know what that was. Nobody knows what it was. There's no evidence from it, but it was just an event in history. And so it boggles my mind to think that we have had something crash here. That doesn't make sense. Do I think we're being visited? Yes. It's not really a great answer. I hate the answer.
No, because
I like your perspective.
Yeah.
Because it's unbiased by the history to an extreme degree. Because
Right.
what was the history? How accurate was it? If you look at Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, how can anyone not believe that guy, right? But is it true? So
Right.
there was documentation of one particular crash and the technology that was gleaned from it, and what he did in his role to disseminate that information. But then your point, well, maybe we did see some technological advancement then, but why not now? Where's the rest of it? Where's the continuation? Maybe the government put the clamp down on it, or maybe
Cover stories, just
It's
cover story. And the fact is that UFO people are so quick to explain these debris sites that the government's like, Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. Sure, UFO. But it's actually Russian, and they know it's Russian, and they've already gotten the interesting bits. I don't know. That's totally conjecture,
Yeah,
hypothetical on
it
my
could
part.
be.
But
Yeah.
at the same rate, I just understand how historically we do things by cover story. And the fact is that I've also witnessed what I thought or I consider the real UFO.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we could shoot that down because it doesn't. I mean, I don't think there's any way we'd be able to shoot that down from what I saw. It's not even in the same place at the same time. Like it's there and then it's there. And I don't know how it got from there to there. And here's the other thing, truly, from what I can tell on the real stuff from people that are in the know, they have no way to collate it either. And so the fact is, yes, we tracked that balloon. No problem. We can track that. Now try tracking something at 60,000 miles an hour. Now you're talking about things that are going to involve secret military tech that can track that. Now you're on a whole nother level of discussion that you'll never hear about, right?
Right.
So this is where I get into the frustrating part, because there is a reality there, but it's so easy to keep a secret because of the way it moves. You'd be lucky to capture it. I mean, I was so lucky to capture even a few frames of whatever I caught.
Exactly.
Who knows what I caught? It may not even be from a UFO. It may not be. I don't know. But my point is simple, that you can kind of understand why I have a hard time with this question deeply, because I want to believe, but I don't think that we have experienced a crash here on this planet, just because I'm in awe by their tech. And they're so far advanced that even if it was just 50 years or 75 years ago, that's nothing in their time frame. So we're still seeing today the same tech that flew 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, for that matter.
That's a good take too. That's a good take. One, and that's and Mateo knows we talk about this, but I'm one that walks the line. I walk the middle of the road and let the evidence sway me to either side. And so today, I could have enough information to have me over here, but if you show me something, it might take me over here. So that's the same way I feel about this. And I kind of had some things that I wanted to kind of point out, and I had a video actually queued up. Check this out. This is one of the things that'll kind of go along with what I'm talking about here. Let me see if this will apply. So this is the UAP floating over to the left. Then boom, he cuts back and projectile. What is that?
Yeah.
This was one of those space shuttle
STS-48. STS-48. Right. So
the famous ice crystals.
Right. So with that, just look, because you can look at it a few different ways. So you could say, it was ice crystals. It did blow up that way. You could say this is, what do they call those sprites that shoot up from the top of thunderclouds?
Yeah, the lightning that goes up.
So you could say it was that, but then you could also say that it's something being shot at. I mean, it clearly went to the spot where the projectile was going to come, and then it moved out the way, and a second later, here comes the projectile. So, you just have to ask yourself. Now, with that being said, I just want to point out a few. It really is more so just pointing out the fact that if there are crashes or a lot of people say they were on scene and they saw these things, and then all of a sudden the military showed up and cordoned off the area. So Cape Girardeau, Gerardo. Okay.
Yeah.
I murdered it. But
No,
1941, yes, they had reported a crash in a field. It was reported as a plane crash, but once arriving on the scene, they saw metallic debris and no wings on the craft. Possibly one being found alive, but quickly died afterwards. Military showed up immediately and swore everyone to secrecy. That's 6 years before Roswell, and also 6 years before the Mount Rainier, right? So Trinity crash, August 1945, avocado-shaped UFO crashed in the desert near San Antonio, New Mexico. 3 air-breathing humanoid beings reported to be found inside a craft. Then you go to 47, which is obviously Roswell, reported 2 different crash sites for that. And moving on, Aztec, New Mexico, March of 1948, supposed craft was found crashed at the top of a mesa, and reportedly inside were 16 humanoid alien beings. I think someone had mentioned that that may not be so true of a story, but it's one that's listed. You have the Kingman, Arizona UFO crash, which is spring of 1953. After nuclear detonations in the area, a fleet of 6 crafts were observed nearby. 3 supposedly crashed and were recovered and taken to a military base. So just once again, an example where they're right there. Then obviously this one wasn't a crash, but maybe it hints to the ability for these things to have their own issues potentially. But the Maury Island incident, where you had 6 crafts, one of those almost crashed, ended up spewing out this like molten material, which ended up flying out, hitting the boat, broke the son's arm, killed the dog. And then
that was in your area of the woods, Tim, right? That was up in
more
Washington
Puget
State,
Sound, exactly.
Yeah.
And you have the 1996, obviously, we know the Varginha, Brazil is featured in Moment of Contact, where the gentleman says he's right there. And this thing already on fire, already damaged, came kind of floating down and tried to right itself and ended up crashing. Military was on the scene immediately. So it's just, I just asked, like, why are they always Johnny on the spot? How are they always Johnny on the spot? Like, is it, if these are just going to be represented as crashes, how are they aware and there within moments of something like this happening? You have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Now, just a couple other incidents that weren't really crashes, but to kind of put it in perspective, I guess they had a 1974 Wales. They had one called the Berwyn Mountains UFO incident. Which is really just something that looked like a shooting star that had crashed off into the mountains. They never found any debris, so they couldn't confirm what it was. But then you had Avi Loeb just not too long ago talking about going off the Australian coast and searching for the meteor that crashed in 2014, thinking it potentially could be of alien origin. So the question I asked with that, like, if they're falling out of the sky like that, whether they're being shot down or whether they're crashing, are there a fraction of these things that are being labeled as shooting stars and meteors that could actually be damaged UAP falling into re-entry through the atmosphere? Because anything that enters the Earth's atmosphere that can withstand it is going to glow and it's going to leave a trail. So, you know, is it potentially a thing as far as the shooting, the shooting stars being UAP goes? Well, I mean, what do you think about that?
I'll take a crack at it. I mean, stuff comes into our atmosphere all day, every day. We know that. The Avi Loeb case in particular, the reason he feels that this is something of potential alien or extrasolar origin is because of the speed at which it entered our atmosphere and the fact that it survived the trip as well as it did. So his conclusion was that it was tougher than iron. So he knows if it was a pure iron meteor, which is probably the toughest one that the universe would have to offer, it would have burned up sooner or wouldn't have likely made the trip. That's part of the thing. And the other thing is its speed was an indication that it came from outside the solar system because it was already on an escape velocity. In other words, it wouldn't have been captured by the sun. It would have just kept on going by like a Muamua. But so those are the 2 reasons he thinks that that's interesting to go look at. I totally agree. I don't know how he's going to find it, but it'll be very interesting. He's looking to see if there's any exotic materials there that could prove that it may not be of natural origin. Beyond that, yeah, maybe the UAPs would normally be stealth or not be visible or not leave a visible trail. But when they are malfunctioning, are they going to leave a visible trail, as it seems like in a lot of those historical cases they did? Certainly plausible. I have no doubt that that could happen.
So Magnetic has asked, simple system or states a simple system error can or causes major malfunction. And I mean, I totally agree. One small thing could send the whole ship down. But then I have to ask this question: what is the probability of 100% of those of the UFOs that are crashing were due simply to mechanical problems? I mean, is it plausible to think 100% of them are crashing due, or is there can't be 100%? It says say 99.9, which would leave what 0.01 percent chance of it not being a crash, and that's enough right there. I mean, especially when you see the projectile being shot out on the other video. We can't confirm that that's what it was doing, but if it was the case, it could explain why some of these crafts are being seen already damaged and smoking when they're on their way down. And so, with that being said, there was, let me see, and we talked about the military, in most cases, immediately or on the scene afterwards, almost like they know ahead of time that this is going to happen. And we have in recent years been made aware of historic and current incidents where it was noted the militaries globally have fired on UAP. Now we know this from current recent stories. Now, is this if this is true, then why would the rules change in space? So if they're doing that here terrestrially, then why wouldn't they do that up there as well? I mean, in terrestrial war, celebrated to recover your opposition's tech, their vehicles, their weapons, to study them, tear them down, learn how they work, learn how to benefit from the tech, as well as defend yourself from it. Now, if you apply this model to an extraterrestrial conflict, then you might just be able to see the plausibility of how so many ultra advanced craft find themselves shot down. Oh, I mean, crashed and retrieved. Sorry about that. So what do you think about that, Tim?
Yeah, well, we know that we have the Space Force, and it is absolutely dealing with our satellites fighting each other. You know, we have adversaries in space, and we are absolutely already in contention. You bring up the military. Our military does definitely have a plan installed for alien invasion. Now, you may not hear about it. I'm sure it's secret, but I know it exists. And so that's one of those things, you know, they do have a contingency plan for. And I just want to briefly bring up something that Gary, go ahead. Did you have a point?
No. Go ahead. Yeah, no.
Something Gary Nolan had brought up that I found was really interesting was that, and he brings up the Smithsonian here, that Smithsonian and agencies in the world, for that matter, would celebrate in any bit of information about interstellar, whether it's a meteor that Avi Loeb drags from the bottom of the ocean. I mean, that's a Nobel Prize right there. If we heard of metamaterials recovered from an alien craft or any kind of alien bodies recovered, the people that would have worked on that, you're talking about Nobel Prize science, right? Public science. This wouldn't have been swept under the rug. This is something that would have absolutely been chart busting. And so Gary Nolan's take on whether we've had crash retrievals, although he believes that there are metamaterials that exist, he doesn't necessarily think they come from crashed vehicles from outer space. And so he circles back to this theory that if anything had ever crashed, and we had access to it, whether it was military on first sight or whoever's country, their military hits at first sight, you're talking about a world topic that it would put, in his opinion, have escaped, and the subject would have escaped. It wouldn't have been kept secret. These things would have been brought to the forefront and celebrated, because you would have been talking about a universal interest that would have been celebrated by the public. And so he doesn't feel that necessarily there's a lot of truth behind some of the crash stories. Now, that's hard to hear because we have witnesses, we have, such great history of these crashes. But at the same rate, if you think about it, just kind of a big picture, it does seem to make a little bit of sense. Now, I'm not saying by any means that I don't believe that any crashes ever existed. I think it's possible. But I like Gary's take on this, that the Smithsonian would have harvested this and celebrated it, and our world, we would have been giving Nobel Prizes out to the people that understood this and were able to bring this knowledge to us.
That's a good take. I mean, it makes total sense. I could see it, definitely. Now, but then I guess that takes me to, so then what do you think about Bob Lazar then? Because Bob Lazar, 89, says he sees these crafts at S4, multiple versions of crafts. So then is his story bullocks, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, there's obviously like truths and not truths with him, because he's definitely a scientist and a genius, and he may have spent time there. But possibly duped, to be shown things to lead him down that way as a disinformation person that really believes what he saw. But either way, you can't go by Bob Lazar's story, because why would there only be one witness at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, have you been to Area 51?
Well,
like, physically?
I haven't, but I have
Not
plenty
in
of
the gates.
contacts. No, I will be around that area shortly, but I'm not trying to investigate our stuff, right?
Mhm.
So I have no interest in, and if they do have spacecraft there from another planet there, good on them. I want nothing to do with that. I'm interested in the stuff that I have access to publicly, that I'm allowed to. So I love the stories that come from there.
Mhm.
But I have to really take it all with a grain of salt. Even my insiders that are telling me that there's nothing there to see, I have to take that as, with a grain of salt too, because there's so much information coming from all sides. But there are definitely some things, that I can determine are definitely true, and there are some things I can definitely say are false. And so
Mhm.
part of Bob's story is definitely true. Definitely true. He's a scientist, a genius, and he manufactures all kinds of things to this day. He's here in Oregon, right? He's actually not too far from me.
Mhm.
Now, the other aspect of that is, I don't know whether he was duped or whether he is falsifying, but there's an aspect of the story that is, I believe, not true. And potentially, I'm not sure of the motivation at the time, but it was something that it may have gotten away from him. Let's just say, and we'll leave it at
Embellishment,
that.
just embellish it a
Well, the
little.
original story may have just been in his mind going to stay within that circle, and he's just talking to the UFO
Mm.
crowd back then. And so he would gain popularity there, perhaps, and with George Knapp and his friends. And like he was trying to get in. And now it's like, it's a whole different thing now. And so for him to have to stick by that, he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to talk about it because he doesn't want to talk about that part of the story.
Persistently
You make a lot of sense,
lie.
Tim. You make a lot of sense with that, man. I mean, I've never heard
And remember,
that
so
take.
my foundation is in psychology. And so when he first came on, did the interview with Corbell, you
George
could
Knapp.
see, and
the new interview.
and he did another interview on the radio with the prize fighter. I'm sorry, Rogan. And so when he was with Rogan, he had a horrible migraine. He'd eaten junk food that day, and you could definitely tell that he did not want to talk about certain things, and it created stress, and it came out in the form of a migraine. And these are the sorts of things that you see on prison inmates when they're talking about the parts of the history that they don't want to talk about or that are not true. Okay, so it is typically, when you've got somebody cornered, they express through their body in one way or another. And so
Yeah.
you can see that stress come through when he was talking about the parts he didn't want to talk about, which are element 115 and the sports model and all that stuff. Now, if you talk to him about his current business, he's fine. He's great. He can talk about science. He's educated and knows a lot. And he may have spent time at Area 51. But consider what I'm expressing here and just take it from there. And I feel like that's a lot of what has gotten away from us with the history in this topic, because at one point, let's remember, UFO topic was still entertainment and not a real topic to a lot of people. And you can tell by the kind of magazines and the narrative in the magazines that were back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then the subject shifted gears in the 2000s. And then the military got involved. Now we start asking real questions because there is something real to this topic, but it's been bastardized, by people trying to cash in.
Whew, great.
That's a very good point.
That was
no,
That's a great
like
thing.
That's a great viewpoint, because what you're saying, Tim, is that the vast UFO history that we all feel almost obliged to give credence to may be merely the fact that back then you could fabricate a story and get away with it, because the technology, no one was walking around back then with a high resolution camera and video recorder like we are now. So you could say just about anything back then. And if you were reputable, as Bob Lazar was, because he could say stuff with a straight face and may still be to this day, not implying he's lying, he might not be the only one, right? And there weren't that many.
There were quite a few players.
There were quite a few players, but it's a finite number. And that could be the bulk of our UAP UFO history. It could be made up of a lot of that.
And consider also, just for a moment, we have the Wilson Davis documents that are actually in congressional history now.
Yes.
The original, so those guys were talking about their discussions that they had had with other people, right?
Yes.
One of those people was Dr. Greer, that they're getting their information from. Now they're talking about it. Now there's a Wilson Davis document based on history, and they each had their own sources, which were books and things that were written, Ruppelt, and people that were also very much people that we were looking for truth and history. And since there was a book, we considered it truth.
Yes.
But no, and I'm not. No, here's the thing. Let me be very clear. I am not saying 100% that these things are not true. I don't know. This is my opinion 100%, that a lot of what was just granules of truth were embellished to sell books or create narratives for one reason or another, to maybe just be pertinent. I don't know. But even cats like John Lear, I have questions about. Yeah. And I mean, he's not here to defend himself, so I'm not going to get too deep. But my point is that this is a group of buddies. I don't know, it's so easy for real interest to get diluted when you're distracted by dollars or buddies or partying or just the fact that the UFO crowd is a lot of fun. I you know what I mean? And so I know that I'm upsetting a lot of people by saying
a lot of those.
Oh no, Tim has become a skeptic.
No,
I'm not a skeptic. That's the thing.
I'm kidding.
Or maybe I am. I'm skeptical, but I'm also a believer, right? I do believe that there is absolutely something else that exists, and I hope it's visiting here. I think it is.
Yes.
I know there's got to be life out there. The question is whether it's coming here. And so that's been my big thing. But the history, I've tried to separate the history from what I'm working on, because ufology and the history of UFO is just too rife with conjecture. And I can't get into that too hardcore. And so when I'm asked about crashes, whether I think it's true, you want my honest opinion, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and that's what the show is for. Yeah. I mean, this is to present a topic, and then it could go either way because we don't know for sure.
We don't know.
So, but what I would like to do is take, because just like you said, there's going to be some audience members, viewers out there and say, "Oh, Tim, what are you talking about?" So I'm just going to play devil's advocate, and As far as let's just say this: you and I both had an experience where we saw something that we could probably feel isn't from here. So the next question would be: is that were did we have something piloting those or controlling those intelligently? Probably based on what we talked about, lean to yes on that. So then we understand that something intelligent is here, controlling something physical in our skies. Then just off of that fact alone, then it's plausible that if it's in our sky at some point, it could end up on our ground, whether it's been shot down or whether it was malfunction. So saying that, the reason why I say that is because there's another narrative, and I know we've all talked about this before on what we feel like these ETs are here for, if their intentions are good or not. And you have to think about it. So just with this scenario, so say they crafts are getting on the ground somehow. We're ending up retrieving those and potentially bodies with those as well. So if we feel like these ETs are here for positive reasons or to forward humanity, or they have just any sort of moral compass, then and this is what I put down because I think it really kind of hits home to something to think about. So now, if we're to believe and we hope that the ETs have an emotional moral compass, then in a situation where we've retrieved bodies, it might make sense that they would actually have resentment towards us for not being able to retrieve the occupants of one of these crash crafts. If the shoe was on the other foot and we were visiting another inhabited planet, and one of our ships actually went down, totally plausible, and the inhabitants of that planet took the bodies of our crew. We were unable to recover them. Our natural human emotions, and if we're going to say that they can align with us anywhere emotionally and morally, then that says our human emotions in that situation would go from peaceful to anger and resentment. So if history has anything to say about the future, and then obviously war after that is what we specialize in. So the thing is that if these things are being brought down one way or the other, these bodies are being recovered and taken by the military to be examined on and maybe never returned to the entities. Is it plausible that at some point, if they came here as peaceful beings, that they could build up some sort of resentment based on what we're doing and then turn into a totally different situation? What is your view on that?
I'll take a crack at this one first, Tim. And
it's a movie waiting to be written.
I love Rob. I love the way you brought us all back again by connecting those dots of like, well, if they're in their skies, then maybe they could end up on the ground, and if they're on the ground, then whoever's piloting might be in trouble. No, it's if you can't have one without the other, is your point. Here's my thought on whether or not they would be benevolent or malevolent as far as coming here and running into trouble, finding out that we may not be so cooperative and may hold their victims hostage. I am going to say, and you used humanity as an analogy if we went elsewhere. Here's the difference. In order for if we were to go elsewhere at the current state of technology that we have right now and our current level of evolution and our current level, let's call it, of enlightenment and of advancement, we wouldn't be able to get very far. And maybe thank goodness for that, right? Because our warring, barbaric ways that the late Stanton Friedman used to talk about, how he said we were a people engaged in tribal warfare, at least from the aliens' perspective. We wouldn't be able to take our brand of that too far in our current state of advancement and of enlightenment. So now, since if the ETs are visiting here, they are advanced beyond I feel, anything that we can even comprehend, let alone replicate or understand, then their level of advancement and enlightenment has, I believe, brought them beyond. They've transcended these. They've transcended anger and retribution and revenge. The feelings that you were describing that we might have if our victims, no man left behind, right? For those who were left
Exactly.
in the military, that may not apply to them because they have gone beyond what we would feel. So they're coming here, they're advanced by however many thousands or millions of years. It's a different ball game for them than it would be for us in their shoes. That's my reason why I think they would not react in the same way.
Okay, before we go to Tim, I just want to ask you, if that's true, then why would they have an interest on taking us and examining us? Like, why would that interest be there then if they didn't have that view? Just in your opinion.
Well, as far as that goes, abduction, genetic manipulation, etc., they're learning something or trying to ascertain something from our present state of evolution that may or may apply to theirs. I mean, I'm a firm believer in evolution and what happens with any species over a long period of time. What happens to humanity in 1,000,000 years? What are we going to be? What sort of being or entity are we going to be? Are we going to run into genetic trouble, right? Where we need to understand how to get out of it. And maybe by them studying us, they're able to learn something. I really just think it's a learning endeavor for them as far as what they're doing with us. There's other motivations too. Maybe they are intervening in a way as well, but maybe there's something to be learned from us that might apply to them as well.
How about you, Tim? How about you bring it home for us? What are your thoughts on what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely consider that there must be interaction taking place. Like you're saying, the fact that they're up there means that they're absolutely coming to the ground, and that makes sense to me. I feel that they are interacting, in one way or another, simply because I have that kind of personal belief. Since I had my experience, I've had that kind of feeling that there's something going on. And so, that leads me to believe that, they definitely are interested in us. And let's face it, if they've traveled all this way through the galaxies, interplanetary, you've got to think that they've seen quite a few inhabitable planets, potentially. Most planets aren't habitable. And here we are. We're one of those habitable planets. And so it's probably absolutely appreciated. And they're hoping to coexist and perhaps exist, unnoticed to an extent. And once they've been noticed, they're like, okay, well, they know about us. So, I mean, I just put myself like you had done, put yourself in their shoes. And if we were visiting their planet, how would you want to interact? Well, it's really tough, right? Because you brought up Varginha, and theoretically that was an ammonia-based creature that they came into interaction with, which tells you right there, they are completely different, right? That creature is completely different from us. So that means their thinking is completely different from us. And so for us to think on human terms is not going to work, right? They may be motivated by something completely different. And what we consider peaceful may not be what they consider peaceful. So these terms get really muggy, but I do love the fact that you're bringing this up in a very realistic way, because I do believe that there is an interaction taking place. And I do think that they're interested. And the fact that if they are here, they have technology, which means that there is some interest in bettering themselves and investigating and curiosity and learning. So those are some basics that we may have in common. And so, I mean, I can't draw too much more from it than that, but I would love to keep it in a positive realm.
Yeah.
I don't want to think of it as something nefarious. I would love to consider it just curiosity and the love for our planet and wanting to understand it.
Exactly. I agree with you. I really hope that that's the way that it goes. Especially for not even for the sake of me, like I said, for the sake of the kids and grandkids, and for the sake of them, because they're not even here yet. They're not even haven't even been created, and I would hate for them to not have that down the road. The only thing we can do is from here is just try to prepare humanity as a whole for where this could go, and like I said, hopefully it's positive. I did want to say, because Magneticus has been on fire in the chat over there. He did say he wanted to let you know Timbits is catchy. Okay, I think it's going viral too. I'm hearing it everywhere. Timbits.
It's a donut, but sure.
Yeah. Oh, and is that what it is? Is that
My
why?
head looks like a donut, I think.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that's not why
I
Dave
thought it
calls
was
you
like
Timbit.
10 bits, like bits of information. Like
Maybe that's
Timbits.
it. There
I
you
thought
go.
that's what it was. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Didn't Dave
So,
give you that nickname? I
he
don't know where
did.
that came from.
It's a Canadian thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It is a
So
donut shop. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Magneticus.
Forgot about that.
Does anyone know what this is? The CRISPR. Do you understand what he's saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Magneticus
that
knows deep.
genetic manipulation, that DNA
Okay. So this is what he's talking about
manipulation.
with the frog embryos. Is that
Yeah,
what he's
there's a,
talking about? Okay.
They're blending. Yeah, they're bringing the mammoth back too. By the way, that is
yeah,
happening.
I saw that last week. That's going to be
Unbelievable.
great,
I
man.
think he said YJ Overlander gave you the 10 bits.
He might have. Yeah, he might have. That's a good call.
Well, man, we've been here for a while, and you know what? It's this Friday, every Friday is not seeming like enough for me, man. So we may have to jump it out to like a second day of the week, maybe Wednesdays and Fridays, and because there's so much to talk about, and it's hard to do in just a short amount of time.
You got some good shows
Magneticus
coming up,
says,
Rob, right?
Supercomputer. Oh, right. So yeah, we have special guest next week from United Unidentified Celebrity Review, and then Lou's Reviews. We have Luis Jimenez coming in, and you know, I
That'll
think
be
it's going to be
interesting.
pretty good. Yeah, because
That's great.
he has a new outlook on things, and
Yeah,
I've
worked with him.
yeah,
Plenty. He's a great guy.
he is definitely a great guy, and he's an awesome actor, underrated too, man. We'll end up going into that, but that'll be next Friday. Hope you guys all show up.
Sure.
Let's see. So with that being said, we can go ahead and jump. Really, the science fiction to science fact movie edition, we just did that 3 days ago, so we're just gonna keep it with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Just go out and watch that and just see how you feel about it post 2017, and just see if you feel any different way, and see how on point they were with all their references there. So we'll just keep that at that, and yeah, I guess we can just wrap it up, man. I really appreciate you guys coming in. I knew this was going to be a heavy conversation. I knew I was going to probably step out of my element a little bit. So, but I'm passionate about making sure that the banner on the social digs is digging up the truth and burying misinformation. So anytime some misinformation is presented, and I saw a show perpetuate the misinformation, I'm like, nah, we need more people to kind of stomp that out. And so I kind of made sure that this week was about that, and I think I kind of did that. So I'm done with Chinese balloons, and we can go ahead and move on.
Put it in the box and then putting it on the shelf.
Yeah, that's what Fessler says. Okay, so with that being said, really appreciate you guys coming by. I love talking with you guys. Like I said, it's all family at this point. You're no longer a special guest, Tim. I'm taking that off your moniker. You are just a family member here. Just like I told Mateo, my family member's house, I walk right through the front door, and I want you to do the same thing. Mateo already knows that. I want to thank everybody for coming out, man. Magneticus, who's always supporting. I really appreciate you. And like I said, I'll show you how much I appreciate that down the line, buddy. So you don't worry about it. And we had also one of our new subscribers show up here who was Alien Outlaw. Yeah. So I totally appreciate that. We had a lot of our new subscribers came from the skywatching community. So I said I'm going to dedicate a show to that. Maybe that'll be what I do on a Wednesday show. But I know, Tim, you're actually a sky watcher currently, so it'd be perfect time. And what I wanted to do, heads up, is kind of just show the average person or what they can do to become a sky watcher and be able to take down some credible information. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So I'll send you guys to the back and I'll do the outro, and then I'll talk to you guys in the back in a minute here. All right. Thanks so much.
All right.
All right. Well, man, it was a blast here. The time went so fast. But time goes fast when you're having fun. And I hope you really gathered something here today. We really wanted to make sure that we this time for sure put this whole thing to rest. As time goes, as our community grows, the chat will come a lot more live, and then we'll be doing something called viewer sightings, because I know there's a lot of you out there who have sightings, and I want to dedicate a segment to you guys. Maybe every week, take some of the best sightings or as many as we can play in an episode to kind of, show what it was that you experienced. So outside of that, I've done a whole lot of probably too much talking here today. Definitely want to thank you guys for coming by the Social Dig. My name is Mr. Rob G. You guys all take care. Later.